Carl Jung discovered that empaths are not just sensitive people, they are perceivers. They see what others refuse to acknowledge. They feel what remains hidden beneath the surface. And when they finally understand what they are perceiving, they stop being victims of their sensitivity and become masters of it. Jung worked with patients who could sense things before they happened, who knew when someone was lying without being told, who felt the emotional undercurrents in a room before a word was spoken. He did not call this weakness. He called it unconscious perception, and he believed that when made conscious, it becomes power. The empath has abilities that most people do not possess, not because they are special in some mystical sense, but because their psyche operates differently. They are attuned to the unconscious in ways that others are not. They pick up on signals that most people filter out. They feel the shifts in energy that others ignore. And for most of their lives, they have suffered because of this. They have absorbed emotions that were not theirs. They have been overwhelmed by the chaos of others. They have been drained by their own sensitivity. But this suffering was never the point. It was the training ground. And now, the empath is ready to use what they have learned. In our last 3 videos, we explored the empath's journey through disillusionment, withdrawal, and return. We saw how the empath awakens to the truth of their relationships, how they stop caring as a form of self-preservation, and how they emerge sovereign. If you haven't seen those, check out the playlist to catch up. But there is something we have not yet addressed. The abilities the empath has carried all along, the ones they thought were curses. Jung understood these abilities differently. He saw them as tools, and in this video, we explore how to use them correctly. The first ability the empath possesses is the capacity to read the unconscious. Most people operate on the surface level. They listen to what is said, they observe what is shown, and they take things at face value. The empath does not. The empath feels what is not being said. They sense the contradiction between a person's words and their energy. They know when someone is lying, not because of any concrete evidence, but because something in the interaction feels off. This is not paranoia, it is perception. The empath is detecting incongruence. They are picking up on the signals that the other person is unconsciously broadcasting. Jung called this the collective unconscious, the layer of the psyche that exists beneath individual awareness. The empath has access to this layer in ways that most people do not. They are not filtering information through logic alone. They are receiving it through intuition, through the body, through the psyche itself. And this makes them deeply attuned to truth. Not the truth that people present, but the truth that people carry beneath the surface. The empath knows when someone is in pain, even when that person is smiling. They know when someone is angry, even when that person is calm. They know when someone is hiding something, even when that person appears open. For most of the empath's life, this ability has been a burden. They felt things they did not want to feel. They knew things they did not want to know. And they had no framework for understanding what was happening. They thought they were absorbing the emotions of others. They thought they were responsible for managing those emotions. But they were not absorbing anything. They were perceiving. And perception, when misunderstood, becomes suffering. The empath who does not know they are perceiving will try to fix what they sense. They will take on the pain of others as their own. They will exhaust themselves trying to resolve what is not theirs to resolve. But the empath who understands perception can use it differently. The key is detachment. Not the cold, indifferent kind of detachment, but the conscious kind. The empath must learn to observe what they are sensing without taking it on. They must recognize that feeling someone else's pain does not mean they are responsible for that pain. They must understand that knowing someone is lying does not mean they have to confront it, fix it, or carry it. The empath's role is not to save everyone. Their role is to see clearly. And once they see clearly, they can choose how to respond. They can choose to engage or to walk away. They can choose to offer support or to protect their energy. They can choose based on what serves them, not based on what others need from them. This is the shift from unconscious empathy to conscious perception. The unconscious empath feels everything and is overwhelmed. The conscious empath feels everything and is unmoved. They have learned to separate their own emotional state from the emotional states of others. They have learned that they can care about someone without carrying them. They have learned that their sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a tool, and like any tool, it must be used with intention. The second ability the empath possesses is the capacity to sense energy. This is not mystical, it is psychological. Every person carries a certain energetic signature, a quality that can be felt in their presence. Some people drain energy, others replenish it. The empath is acutely aware of this. They know within minutes of meeting someone whether that person will deplete them or uplift them. They know which environments feel safe and which feel hostile. They know which conversations will nourish them and which will exhaust them. This knowing is not based on logic. It is based on the body's response to the unconscious signals being received. Jung spoke of synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence between inner and outer events. The empath experiences this constantly. They think of someone, and that person contacts them. They sense something is wrong, and later discover they were correct. They feel drawn to a certain place or person, and that encounter becomes significant. These are not random occurrences. They are the empath's psyche communicating with them, guiding them toward what aligns and away from what does not. But most empaths ignore these signals. They override their intuition with logic. They dismiss their gut feelings as irrational, and in doing so, they walk into situations that harm them. The empath who learns to trust their perception stops ignoring the signals. They stop rationalizing away their discomfort. They stop forcing themselves into spaces that feel wrong, simply because they cannot articulate why those spaces feel wrong. They honor the knowing that arises without explanation. And in honoring it, they protect themselves. They avoid people who would exploit them. They leave situations before they become damaging. They make decisions based on alignment, not obligation. This is how the empath uses their ability to sense energy, not by absorbing it, but by reading it and acting accordingly. The third ability the empath possesses is the capacity to see patterns. The empath does not just feel in the moment. They see the trajectory. They recognize when someone is repeating a cycle. They know when a relationship is heading toward collapse before the collapse occurs. They sense when someone is about to betray them, not because of any specific action, but because the pattern is familiar. The empath has lived through these dynamics before. They have seen how people behave when they are hiding something, when they are using someone, when they are about to discard someone. And once seen, these patterns cannot be unseen. Jung believed that the unconscious revealed itself through repetition. The same themes, the same conflicts, the same dynamics would appear again and again until they were made conscious. The empath is the one who sees the repetition. They are the one who recognizes the pattern before it fully plays out. And this gives them an advantage. They do not have to wait for the betrayal to confirm what they already know. They do not have to endure the full cycle to understand where it is going. They can exit early. They can protect themselves before the damage is done, but only if they trust what they see. Most empaths do not trust what they see. They second-guess themselves. They give people the benefit of the doubt. They ignore the red flags because they do not want to be wrong, because they do not want to seem judgmental, because they have been conditioned to override their instincts in favor of being kind. But kindness that requires self-betrayal is not kindness. it is self-destruction. The empath who uses their ability to see patterns must be willing to act on what they see, even when it is uncomfortable, even when others do not understand, even when it means walking away from people they care about. If you could sense deception the moment someone spoke, would you still allow them into your life? Or would you finally trust what you have always known? The fourth ability the empath possesses is the capacity to transmute energy. This is perhaps the most misunderstood. The empath does not just absorb the emotions of others, they transform them. When the empath is in the presence of someone in pain, they do not simply take on that pain. They process it, alchemize it, and reflect it back in a different form. This is why people feel lighter after speaking with an empath. The empath has taken the chaotic, unprocessed emotion and returned it as clarity. They have held space for the other person's unconscious material without being consumed by it. But this ability only works when the empath is grounded in their own center. If the empath is not grounded, they do absorb. They do take on what is not theirs, and they collapse under the weight. Jung spoke of the process of individuation as the integration of opposites. For the empath, this means learning to hold both sensitivity and strength, both openness and boundaries, both compassion and detachment. The empath who has individuated can be present with someone's pain without losing themselves in it. They can offer support without becoming depleted. They can engage with difficult emotions without being overtaken by them. This is the conscious use of the empath's ability to transmute energy. It is not about fixing others. It is about creating a space where transformation can occur while remaining intact. The fifth ability the empath possesses is the capacity to heal through presence, not through doing, but through being. The empath who has done their own inner work, who has faced their shadow, who has integrated their pain, carries a frequency that others can feel. It is not something they project. It is something they embody. And people are drawn to it, not because the empath is trying to attract them, but because the empath has become a living example of what it looks like to be whole. This is not about being perfect. It is about being real. The empath who no longer hides their scars, who no longer pretends to have it all together, who no longer performs strength, becomes a mirror for others. They show what is possible. And that showing is more powerful than any advice, any teaching, any attempt to fix. Jung believed that the greatest gift one person could offer another was the example of their own individuation. The empath who has walked through their own darkness and emerged sovereign does not need to tell others how to heal. Their existence is the instruction. People see the empath's peace and want to know how they found it. People see the empath's boundaries and want to learn how to set them. People see the empath's refusal to tolerate mistreatment and want to understand how they developed that strength. The empath does not have to do anything. They simply have to be themselves. And in being themselves, they give others permission to do the same. But these abilities are only useful if the empath stops allowing them to be exploited. For too long, the empath has given their gifts freely to people who did not honor them. They have offered their perception, their energy, their presence to those who took without gratitude, who used without reciprocity, who drained without consideration. And the empath believed this was their purpose. They believed they were meant to serve, to sacrifice, to give endlessly. But that was never the truth. The truth is that the empath's abilities are meant to be protected, reserved for those who are worthy of them. Jung understood that not everyone is ready for the truth. Not everyone is ready to face their unconscious. Not everyone is ready to do the work, and the empath cannot force readiness. They cannot save people who do not want to be saved. They cannot heal people who are not willing to heal themselves. The empath who tries to do this will be drained, will be disappointed, will be used. The empath who understands this will become discerning. They will offer their gifts only to those who respect them. They will reserve their energy for relationships that are mutual. They will walk away from anyone who treats their abilities as a resource to be exploited. This discernment is not cruelty, it is wisdom. The empath has learned that their energy is finite. They have learned that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. They have learned that some people are only present to take, and that allowing them to take is not love, it is self-abandonment. The empath, who has integrated this lesson, stops making themselves available to everyone. They become selective, they become protective, they become sovereign. And in that sovereignty, their abilities are no longer a burden, they are a source of power. The empath who uses their abilities correctly does not announce them. They do not perform sensitivity, they do not advertise their perception, they simply live according to what they know. They trust their intuition, they honor their boundaries, they walk away from what does not align. They engage with those who reciprocate, they protect their energy as sacred. And in doing so, they stop being victims of their own gifts. They become masters of them. Jung believed that the process of individuation was the central task of a human life. For the empath, individuation means learning to use their abilities consciously, intentionally, protectively. It means understanding that sensitivity is not weakness, perception is not paranoia. Boundaries are not cruelty. The empath who individuates stops apologizing for what they sense. They stop doubting what they know. They stop shrinking to make others comfortable. They step fully into their power. And that power is not loud. It is not aggressive. It is simply the quiet, unshakable knowing that they will never again betray themselves for anyone. The world does not know what to do with an empath who has claimed their abilities. The empath who no longer absorbs, who no longer fixes, who no longer sacrifices themselves, disrupts the dynamics that have always relied on their depletion. People who benefited from the empath's unconscious giving are confused by the conscious boundaries. They accuse the empath of being selfish, of being cold, of no longer caring. But the empath, in their mastery, is unmoved. They know the difference between caring and carrying. They know the difference between compassion and complicity. They know that their worth is not determined by how much they give, but by how well they honor themselves. And in honoring themselves, they finally become what they were always meant to be. Not a sponge for other people's pain, not a tool for other people's healing, but a sovereign being, whole and complete, using their gifts in service to their own truth. This is the correct use of the empath's abilities. Not to save the world, but to protect their own soul. Not to fix everyone, but to live in alignment. Not to prove their worth through sacrifice, but to embody their power through presence. The empath's abilities are not a curse. They never were. They are the empath's greatest strength, misunderstood and misused for too long. But now, the empath knows. They know what they are sensing. They know what they are perceiving. They know what they are capable of. And they know that these abilities do not belong to everyone. They belong to the empath. And the empath will use them as they see fit, without apology, without explanation, without the need for anyone's approval. Jung called this the realization of the self, the moment when the individual stops living according to external expectations and begins to live from their own center. For the empath, this means using their abilities, not to please, not to perform, not to prove, but to protect, to navigate, to choose, to build a life that honors what they know to be true. And in that honoring, they step fully into their sovereignty. The empath, who has mastered their abilities, does not need to convince anyone of their power. They do not need to explain what they sense or justify why they walk away. They simply act on what they know. And in that action, they reclaim the life that was always meant to be theirs, A life built on truth, on clarity, on alignment. A life where their sensitivity is not a weakness, but a gift. A life where their perception is not a burden, but a guide. A life where they are no longer at the mercy of their abilities, but in full command of them. This is what Jung saw in the patients who returned, transformed. They had stopped being victims of their sensitivity and had become masters of it. They had learned to use their abilities consciously, protectively, powerfully, and in doing so, they had stepped into a version of themselves that was unshakable. This is the path for every empath who is ready. The abilities are already there. The only question is whether the empath will continue to let them be exploited or whether they will finally claim them as their own. If this is your truth, type in the comments, "I trust what I sense, and I will no longer ignore it." Claim it. Let it guide you forward.